We'll try to make this as pleasant as possible and answer your questions. And hopefully, if you have others, we'll explain what the next step would be to get those questions to us so we can get answers for you. And as soon as we're ready, we'll get started and we'll respect your time and the you coming out tonight. So thank you. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. We do appreciate it very much. My name is Joe Vunich. I'm the Director of Planning and Parks, and I'm going to do a few other introductions here shortly. But since I'm the first to speak, at least you know my name's Joe. And so from that perspective, again, we really appreciate you taking time tonight. We recognize that your schedules are busy, and we want to use our time appropriately and hopefully answer any questions you have tonight that we can. And if not, we'll do our best to get you answers before any decision is made on this re-occupancy permit program. And I think that's something to emphasize at the start of the meeting. It has been through a number of discussions with a council committee that oversees the Department of Planning and Parks, but it has not yet had a decision made about it. We're still in that kind of fact finding, and tonight is part of that process. As I mentioned, I do want to introduce a few other people. Melanie Ripito is our Assistant Director of Planning and Parks. Travis Newberry is our Senior Planner. In the very back, kind of looking lonesome, is Council Member Ed Marshall, Ward 5. And then finally over in the corner is Officer Steve DeGelder. I'll make mention, Officer DeGelder is what they call an NPO, a neighborhood policing officer. So if you ever have any issues in your neighborhood, he is an excellent resource. Yeah, he's an excellent resource, and they are trained to kind of help in situations that aren't necessarily as problematic as some, but certainly can put resources toward helping you. So thank you to our guest and council person for being here. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you need the restroom, they're up the ramp and to your right. And as I've done before, please help yourself to refreshments and snacks. Also on the back table, there's several things I just want to mention. First, there's a sign-in sheet. I think most of you signed in when you came in, so thank you. All we're trying to do with the sign-in sheet is get your name and a contact, so as we move through this process, we can keep you abreast of what we're doing and the direction we're heading and the things we're talking about internally before they go externally. Also back there is a comment form. If you have comments tonight, please complete it. We'll try our best to answer it tonight. If not, there are others there, comment forms you can take with you and just complete it, drop it in the mail, come by City Hall, drop it off, whatever you choose. We'll be glad to get that information and respond to it. So we're doing our best to kind of keep you all in the loop and get the information we need before any action is taken. Also back there is a sheet of paper, two-sided, that has the frequently asked questions. And we've developed this in conjunction with the City Council Committee that is working on this particular item. And we hope that's informative. And if not, certainly tonight, if you have questions we think deserve to be on it, we'll put them on it and kind of make it better as we go along. So I do want to emphasize that tonight we're really here to give you some explanation of the program. We're not going to spend 15, 20, 30 minutes doing that. What we want to do is give you the highlights, hear your comments, hear your concerns and your questions. And so it truly is an input session. I'm hoping that you tell us something that we didn't know or a problem that you faced that we can address, or at least explain as best as we can how we got here. And to that end, how we got here is kind of an interesting story, and I'll do this as briefly as possible. Since 2006, when the city updated its master plan, we have been talking about occupancy permits. But for the most part, occupancy permits were inclusive of not only rental properties, but also single-family detached and attached existing units. Ultimately, when this came to the forefront at a planning and zoning commission at the start of last year, 2023, we started with a comprehensive program for rentals and owner-occupied homes. As we went through it, we began to see it that, for the most part, owner-occupied homes, given the age of much of our housing stock, didn't necessarily need additional inspections beyond what one fire district of the three that serve Wildwood provide, and then private inspections, oftentimes buyers and sellers arrange at the time of closing or before closing. So we've had this on our books, so to speak, for the better part of 18 years. It's kind of come to a forefront finally, so I don't know if that's like the cream rising to the top of the butter, but we'll see. But I want to give you context, because in certain meetings we've been asked, well, are there really that many rental units in Wildwood? And there are about 1,700 rental units. And it's roughly split between multiple family, the apartment complexes that we have, and then single family dwellings. So that number relative to the overall number of housing units is roughly about a fifth or so. So it is something that's in almost every residential area in Wildwood. And that is one of the reasons the council committee has kind of taken this on and wanted to see where we could end up with it. I would also say that, as many of you know, if you read the newspaper, look on your phone at different news sources, or watch the television, the landscape's changed in rental properties. A lot of it started with the pandemic. Then thereafter, venture capitalists and investment firms got involved in it and started buying up houses and using them as investment tools. And what we were hearing during those processes from trustees of homeowners associations is, particularly those absentee owners, were not giving the property the care they needed. And there was always a request for property maintenance. And property maintenance from the city standpoint is the exterior, only the exterior. And so from the perspective of the city, we wanted to see if there was a better approach, not only to improve properties, but also to ensure that those, let's say, outstate investors, absentee owners, certainly understood that in Wildwood, we want to protect our residents and do the best we can to keep neighborhoods places people want to live and appreciate. And that's really what the crux, the gold of this program is. It's about public safety, making sure people that rent are in a safe situation and that they don't have to worry about, let's say, unpermitted or non-permitted things happening relative to electrical, plumbing, structural, mechanical, whatever the situation might be. It's also about property maintenance, ensuring that that person's investment in a rental property, along with the owners that may be a part of that subdivision or area, don't see a property drop, a property maintenance problem from the perspective of a tenant. And then finally, one of the two key goals of municipal government is to provide for your safety, and we do that in a number of ways. The police is probably the most obvious. The other is to maintain property values, your biggest investment that you have in most instances. And so our goals, our intent are not necessarily to create any type of revenue source. It's not to basically create another layer of problems or bureaucracy upon you. It truly is driven by what Ms. Ripito has called the 3 Ps: public safety, property maintenance, and property values. So tonight, there's really just two components that remain of our discussion, our public input session. And one is Ms. Ripito, who's worked in the cities of Maryland Heights, Town and Country, and Manchester, has implemented these type of programs. So she has much more firsthand experience than Mr. Newberry or I. And she's a good resource in terms of the success or the things she's seen that's worked and haven't worked. And so she's going to give a brief explanation of the program as it's proposed. And then after that, we are going to open it up to question and answers. So just a couple things to close, and I appreciate your attention. Mr. Newberry will bring around a microphone. We're recording it, not so much to keep what you've said, just there's 15 other council people besides Mr. Marshall that we want to make sure can access this and hear your concerns, your questions, your comments. And so he'll walk around with the microphone so it can be recorded and heard. And if you do have comment sheets and want to leave them, if you'll just put them on the back table before you leave tonight, we'll collect those. And as I mentioned, we'll do our very best to get you answers as quickly as possible. And so with that, I'd like to introduce again Melanie Ripito, our Assistant Director of Planning and Parks. And again, from my perspective, thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening. I thank you again for coming out. I echo Mr. Vunich's sentiment, and he covered essentially why the city is taking on this program at this time. And I'm going to just run through the hows of how it's actually going to work. So first off, the inspection is required only on change of tenant or rental properties, owner or tenant of properties that are non-owner occupied. And this will include multifamily as well as single family or attached, detached or attached. A new occupancy permit will be required prior to the next person moving in. And the program, as Mr. Vunich described, has not started yet. We anticipate it will probably start sometime in the summer of 2024. We'll keep our website updated as we work through all the details and as it goes through council process and such. And we'll have plenty of information on there and actually have like a drop dead date, so that way any occupants that move into a space after that date will be required to get an occupancy permit. As to the actual process, okay, perfect. As to the actual process, the city's going to be contracting with St. Louis County to perform the actual inspections. And so to streamline the process, everyone will go to St. Louis County and arrange the inspection through St. Louis County. So you'll pay the associated fees with their inspections, and you'll schedule your inspection or any re-inspections that may have to follow through St. Louis County. And then once that actual occupancy permit or the actual occupancy inspection passes, then you or your tenant will take that along with the occupancy permit application to the city of Wildwood. So you'll bring it here and they'll fill out the actual occupancy permit component of it, which just gives us contact information for who's going to be living in the house, ensures that there's not going to be an over occupancy issue or anything like that. This information is super helpful for our first responders in case there's an emergency at the property. They know how many people are in the house and along those lines. And after that's been approved, then your tenant is welcome to move in and enjoy all the benefits that come with being a Wildwood resident. As to the actual inspection itself, I got it. Oh, nope. As to the actual inspection itself, it isn't as thorough as, say, what you would be paying for on the sale of a home. But it is more thorough than what the fire department conducts. They usually look for life safety issues like means of egress and smoke detectors and things along those lines. This, as Mr. Vernich described, is more of a property maintenance issue. Essentially, if it's there, it has to work, there is some overlap in the inspections, but it will be both the inside and the outside of the property. And when the inspector goes through anything that isn't, any repairs or anything that need to be done, he will document it, will be provided to the homeowner. And once those repairs are made, then you can contact St. Louis County for reinspection. And they include one reinspection with the initial application fee. If they have to come out multiple times, it is my understanding that they do charge additional fees or additional re-inspections. And so as far as that is concerned, the county allows up to 90 days to complete repairs. So from the application or from the first inspection until the second inspection before you would have to apply for a new permit. Also, once it's passed, that inspection itself would be good for 90 days. So in my experience, a lot of property owners have gotten inspections done in anticipation of a new tenant because it is good for 3 months. So you have 3 months to find a tenant and have them moved in before that expires. And so I think that pretty much covers the process. And again, you won't be expected to remember all of this. We will have the website updated. You'll be able to apply for your occupancy permits. The inspections, St. Louis County does just about everything online now, so it's a pretty easy process through them. And we will have it set up here as well. We'll have plenty of information on our website as to the actual process itself. Also, kind of guidelines of what to look for in the inspection. And we'll do our very best to be as helpful as we possibly can. And again, right now there's a comment form online as well as the ones that are here available by all means. Fill them out if you have any comments or suggestions or leave here tonight and you're like, oh, I didn't think of that. My contact information is also on all of it. So by all means, feel free to reach out to me. And on the back of the FAQs, there's a QR code that will take you to the webpage regarding occupancy permits. And so you can keep an eye on it as we update it. And you'll also find the date on there as to when we're actually going to go live with the program. And it also, again, has my contact information. And so with that, I think I've covered everything I need to cover and would be happy to open up the floor for any questions that anyone may have. Not-
One second.
Sorry.
The last point you made, interior and exterior surfaces need to be maintained. What does that mean?
I mean, essentially, like any kind of interior, like walls have to be properly maintained. Same thing with the exterior as far as like patios and things like that. There's everything has to be like up to, say, the building code.
Is this aesthetic or is this?
It's primarily like health, life, safety issues, but it is property maintenance means that it's in good condition.
Okay. Like if my property needs siding, that's a $60,000 job. I mean, what are they going to determine?
Well, that's subject to, just regular code enforcement regulations as it is, I mean, that's subject to the Wildwood's current regulations. So
Okay,
that
so
isn't really
it's
much of a
code-based.
change.
It's code based. It's not
Yeah.
opinion.
No, we're not
Okay.
pulling anything out of the sky. It's all based on the International Property Maintenance Code and building codes. Huh? Mhm. Oh, that is not our goal.
So I understand there's obviously been a lot of work put into this. However, you haven't sold me on why we're doing this. Is there any statistics that you can give that show that the rental properties are the problem that we're even trying to address? So I don't like working on things that don't need to be worked on, and I don't like creating more work or cost us because of no particular reason. So is there any backup information that shows why are we even doing it?
By all means. Yeah. Do you want to?
It's a very good question, and I'll do my best to answer it. And I may have to get you some more statistical information. I don't have it all. My memory's not what it used to be. But here again, I'll start with we estimate about 1,700 rental properties. So that's a large portion of the housing units in the city of Wildwood. this covers not only rental properties for single-family detached units, but also our multiple family units. And we are seeing, just from our own property maintenance inspections over the course of time, issues there. And we can document those because we do photographs and just things that aren't being maintained. So not every single family dwelling that's used for rental purposes is driving this particular program. It's our multiple family as well. What we have heard, and this comes from a lot of the trustees in our homeowners associations, is that they have particular properties that are problems for them. And when we do code enforcement for a property maintenance issue, it may be as simple as just they have cars parked across the sidewalk, they have cars parked in the tree lawn area next to the curb. What we find out, those are the rental properties in the neighborhood. And so have we basically taken all of those complaints and combined them into a spreadsheet? No, it's something we can investigate and address for you. But we're getting it from our first line of defense, which is the trustees and the homeowners associations and our own visual inspections of the multiple family units. And in instances, particularly in some of the locations that I've visited, it's more anymore. There's a lot of mold issues. And I don't know particularly why inside the dwellings. I don't know what may be the cause, obviously water, but it's just something, again, that we're hearing about it, we see it, and from the perspective of the department, I probably could give you a better statistical answer, but I'm not prepared to do that tonight.
Same time. Be the first to admit that a renter is buying a house. That doesn't change. Always. On it. Process or just isn't age.
If I may, sir, just coming from the perspective of other cities that I've worked in which this conversation has definitely come up, there's a commercial component to rental properties that isn't the case in single families. And so like the argument has been made that if you want to live in an unsafe condition or whatever in your own house, like that's one thing, but having, rental, people, tenants, like in an unsafe condition, it's somebody's responsibility to also protect them. And so that can be the case as well, is that fire departments have often considered multifamilies commercial properties and inspected them annually because they are considered, there's a commercial component there that isn't there. And now with the increase of single family residential becoming more and more prevalent in today's day, that need has become more apparent.
And again, we'll do our best to try to find that statistical component that you're asking for. But I think I'll always fall back on, I've been here since the incorporation of the city. So from the perspective of at least the director of planning, people move here with a certain expectation. The expectation is if they invest in the community, its leadership will do everything they can to protect that investment. I know from experience over the years, probably as old as most, if not older than many, but oftentimes neighborhoods don't deteriorate because all of a sudden there's a crime problem. Neighborhoods deteriorate because people quit taking care of the property. And that starts a chain reaction, like a set of dominoes. You're taking care of your property, you're cutting your grass, you're doing all those things to keep it code compliant. Somebody else isn't. The next thing you know, you start thinking about moving where they do, and the properties start changing hands. The charge we have is not to let that happen in Wildwood. Is the likelihood of that happening great? No. But if there's a tool that we can use to ensure that it isn't going to happen, then we're going at least to explore it. And as I said, this is still an idea. It's not a law.
I,
Well, and again, statistically, I certainly can do my best to offer you a response in that regard. What I will tell you is if you're in a rental property and it's an older, let's say, dwelling, and you lack fire, let's say fire detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, you have GFIs that are not code compliant, those are all risk. And the job of government, at least local government, in my mind, is to basically eliminate as many of those risks as you can. Is that justification for the program? I don't know. That's a decision city council will make. But again, I think it's important to emphasize again, laws that are passed by city council and advocated by the departments, whether it's public works, administration, and planning, are those that we think basically achieve the goals I mentioned: public safety, property maintenance, property value. And like I say, I'll do my best to get you more information. No, oh no. With the size we have, we can spend a lot of time. Only on change of tenant or owner.
Yeah, it's not every 12 months annual.
oh, it's for, well, it depends on what kind of house you know, get it,
True.
you know. And data, oh, so that, then address that. Thank you. Aldo.
Hi, I got a couple questions on it. One of the things that you brought up is that this is only for either reoccupancy of a tenant or a owner, but the fact that the city will require a inspection could, if it does not pass inspection, could hold up a sale, could hold up a occupancy, based on based on what St. Louis County finds. Another factor I would see is the quote unquote, is this safe, is based on what the city adopts as code. So 20 years ago, 30 years ago, GFIs didn't exist. Those are new things. Those are good things. They have saved a lot of lives. Going forward, now we're going into arc faults and areas of bedrooms. And yes, are there potential things that could be safer? Yes, but I feel like this can be a area where the city can say, oh, your area is not safe, and we are going to deny you occupancy, or we are going to deny occupancy to a tenant, or even in the process of a sale based on current codes that are not that were not in existence when the premises was built. And then you are requiring owners, potential buyers, or tenants to upgrade your property to today's codes versus what was built back then. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Some of the codes are applicable, like unquestionably, like GFIs, like there are new regulations for that that did not exist. And those are something that you do need to have. In fact, they've continued to change it several times over the last 10 years. So that, yes, you would need to meet certain codes like that. But as far as, the treads of your stairs, in older homes, county recognizes that there are, some existing conditions. They're not going to make you replace the stairs in your house.
But if they decided to be strict on that, they could, and they could stop a sale of a house based on if it doesn't pass code, if it doesn't pass that inspection, that could halt a sale of a property on that. Is that accurate?
It wouldn't stop the sale. It's just that if there's an unsafe situation, it would have to be.
But they're denied
fixed.
occupancy. They can't actually occupy the property until it passes code, until it passes your inspection, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. And so it could hold up occupancy. But either way, it shouldn't hold up the sale of a home because this isn't pertaining to
So you buy a
sales.
house you can't live in
Yeah,
until the city is actually until someone comes in, does the work, and then the city deems it as, or the county deems it as acceptable to live in. So you can buy a house that you cannot live in until the city deems it acceptable to live in because your stair treads are not correct or something of that nature. Is that accurate?
This is for rental properties only, so it wouldn't be.
If you sell the property, you sell.
It's if a rental property changes ownership. It's not. Then an inspection can be required.
So if I were to buy a home in Wildwood, I wouldn't have to go through this process.
No, if you were moving into it and it was going to be an owner occupied home, you do not have to go through this process.
Okay, that was a little unclear, but I still
apologies.
think that's a bit excessive in that process. Also, I've done city inspections for both Baldwin and Ellisville, and they're $50 and $60 respectively. How did you guys come to $95 for a inspection?
We didn't come to that. That is what St. Louis County charges for their inspections. That's directly from St. Louis County's website.
Okay. Well, based on municipalities that are connecting to you guys, it is excessive. It is higher than other municipalities in the area.
Okay.
So I had, if you had something.
Just a couple of things. As Melanie, I think, has explained very well, we contract with St. Louis County for all inspections, whether it's new construction, interior finishes, et cetera. And I think there's a benefit to that. For the most part, they're independent. It's not like, and this hasn't happened, but let's say somebody were to call and say, I'm having a problem with Joe Vunich. Go take a look at that house. It doesn't work that way. County will follow the steps or the requirements in the re-occupancy permit process. So there's an independence there. And I think from the standpoint of the city, generally speaking, inspectors are very professional. And I think they have a great deal of experience in most instances, particularly the ones I see out here that have been out here for years. So I'd like to think the county will head off some of those issues that maybe would raise concerns among some renters, is that we have an independent professional organization that does this not only in the unincorporated area, but for other municipalities.
Okay. How did you guys come to up to 3 months for the time frame in which an inspection is done versus when it would have to be re-inspected if no occupants is actually taking premises?
Again, the 90 days is St. Louis County's regulations, but they're pretty standard. It's been 90 days at most other cities that I've worked at or looked into. And the theory behind it is that hopefully there aren't a whole lot of changes that happen within those 90 days. But I mean, if the house has been sitting vacant for a year, and say you haven't had a tenant in it for a year, then requiring another occupancy inspection isn't unreasonable. 90 days is 3 months.
I could understand a year, but 3 months does seem excessive or minimal for the amount of time it takes to actually get a quality tenant in a property. Especially if you go into the wintertime, if you're trying to rent in November, let's say you do that. Then Thanksgiving, Christmas comes up and you're in the winter, which no one wants to move in. And then you're up for another $95.50 for no one who has ever actually occupied the premises.
Well, and that's why some property owners decide to wait until they have a tenant lined up. I mean, usually it takes a tenant 30 days notice or so to get out of the place that they're currently in, and you can get an inspection and generally an occupancy permit within that 30 days. And
Okay.
so,
Well, I don't like the answer. I'm done.
I think the question about the time frame needs to be explored. So we'll talk with St. Louis County. If ultimately, we contract with them like is being proposed and see if they have some flexibility with the city of Wildwood in terms of their standard time frame, and kind of go from there. We were able during the years to amend some of the building codes at times to fit Wildwood more so than, let's say, the overall county. So we'll see what success we have. And if you've signed in, we'll make sure that we respond to that question and tell you what we found out.
Yes, I was wondering, I've got a close relationship with my insurance company. They actually come out once a year and inspect the house. They want to see what the house, smoke detectors, everything you're talking about. So I think it's just kind of going to be a double standard. I don't know if that's applicable to other insurance companies, but that's just the relationship I have with them. So, and then again, you talk about people keeping their grass cut or whatever, that, you know, the neighbor, you don't want to see that. Isn't that a case-to-case basis? Shouldn't be, you know, something that
And so maybe that wasn't the best example. I was trying to reference that we get a call on the height of grass. We end up finding out is it's a rental property. We have a process, the nuisance code for that, and it is entirely on a complaint, or if we drive by and just see something that's not right or awry. So maybe that wasn't the best approach, but that's how you discover things. And that's how, again, from the perspective of the one gentleman, we kind of embarked on this process.
the other thing is, why does St. Louis County have to be involved?
Back when the incorporators began this process, they wanted to have a small city staff and contract for services. Most days we have about 24 people that serve an area of 68 square miles and 35,000 residents. So from that perspective, we're not staffed at this moment to provide this extra service. And so that's why we are considering St. Louis County. Quite frankly, there may be a point where we realize it can be done in-house, less expensive, and let's say a less amount of time. And that may be a decision city council will make. But for now, we just don't have the people to do a program like this.
So are we talking two inspections, one with St. Louis County and then one with the fire department?
If you were in the Metro West Fire Protection District, yes, it would be a double set of inspections. And that occurs in the unincorporated areas of St. Louis County where Metro West provides services, like say down on Keeper Creek Road. But as I think Ms. Ripito mentioned, and we have, I believe, in our Q&A, they look at more the fire code versus, let's say, property maintenance and building code component.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. And that's okay. So you come and you inspect my house, I pay the fee, inspection goes great. They say everything's great. Why does it have to be re-inspected again if I get a new tenant 6 months down the road? I mean, if my GFIs are in, if my siding is fine, if my electricity works and everything, why do I have to pay for another inspection?
So just coming from my own experience doing occupancy inspections, there's a lot that can happen within 6 months inside a home or outside of a home. And again, if nothing happened. The inspection should just go very smoothly and it shouldn't be an issue, but that is not necessarily the case. And with a lot of rental units that I've inspected personally, like, so, and if it's vacant within 6 months, it's usually because there is a problem. So I think that in that case, it is important to reinspect at that time.
My question is more just technical, like for planning purposes. So have a tenant move out and I'm wanting to get a new tenant in. How long is the time frame? Like when I call St. Louis County and I say I want an inspection, how fast does that happen? And then how fast then to get the permit, just because you don't want your rental unit sitting vacant for too long. And then just also, do you have to have the name of the new occupant to get the permit?
Excellent question. So as far as from what I've heard from St. Louis County, just depending on their workload and the number of inspectors they have at the time, it's can take from like 2 days to a week or so to get an inspector out there to do the inspection. And generally people know when they're going to be ready for a reinspection. And so they can plan that in advance. Like say they've got a contractor coming out in a week, they can call county and set that up in advance. So it hasn't really been a problem. As far as the occupancy permit itself, and that's kind of partly why we broke it down into like 2 different pieces of paperwork, is that it's been my experience that when you have it all on one sheet, a lot of times the property owner, is the one getting the inspection, and the tenants are the ones that know who all is going to be living in the house, and it's 2 different entities. And so a lot of times, so bring it down to 2, then property owner can get the inspection, the tenant can get the occupancy permit, and that, I mean, we should be able to turn over in a matter of a couple days or so.
That's helpful.
Huh?
No.
Thank you.
Couple questions. Okay, let's say scenario. You purchase. You want to rent it, but the previous guy, it's handy. He did everything. Oh, made it, but he didn't pull permits. This going to be hunting? Is the county going to be hunting for non-full permit?
I feel like that's a difficult question to
Yeah.
answer. That isn't generally the goal of doing occupancy inspections. Of course it is. Of course it is, but simultaneously,
Ask, oh, but somebody did.
sure.
So now,
It has been my experience in, again, other cities, that generally the only time that something's called out for a permit not being pulled is when it appears to not be up to code. For one. I also did work at a city that we had inspectors that had been there for a really long time, and they could tell you that the house didn't look like that the last time they were in it. That's not going to be the case here. But no, it's not so much a fishing expedition. And in any of those cases in which a permit wasn't pulled, it's generally been, pretty easily resolved, and a permit needs to be pulled and then it gets closed out. They just need to see that it is up to code. And so it's a resolvable issue.
uh,
Sure.
yeah. It's camp. but, but the county, obviously, they can't man so many of their art transportation. And little, a lot of
Well, when we've been discussing this with county for quite some time and have been assured that they will have the manpower in order to do this, and that's part of the process of getting this all set up.
I've, as I mentioned, this kind of originated with our planning and zoning commission in a discussion we held at the end of one of our meetings. And the first call I made was to St. Louis County, first to see if they could do it. And then pretty much the same question. Do you have the staffing to do it in accordance with what we would want as Wildwood representatives? And we've had Kurt Jurgens, who's the municipal contract liaison, come to one of the committee meetings and discuss very similar questions. And there is a number of agreements that have to be signed. And I think as part of those agreements, I think it's only fair to owners of rental properties that we make sure those things are addressed. And if there becomes problematic, solutions to address those problems. And I think that's a contractual component as we move forward. And that's, pardon me.
Take care of.
And that's exactly
versus
what we
just
do.
having
And that's exactly what we do. Each year we have 11 or more contractors that provide public work services and park services. So if it becomes an issue, if the program is in place, certainly that's something we'll investigate, because that's kind of the philosophy of Wildwood. Contract, get the best price you can and the highest quality.
all the other. Whether the renter may on us. Go talk to them, you know, and home and not rent out. Not so.
Okay. I feel like you guys are convincing me that we should just inspect all homes. I think you're going the wrong direction with this.
Like if it's truly about safety, if it's truly about making sure this is an area where Wildwood residents are safe, why would you exempt homeowners from from purchasing a property in Wildwood to not require a inspection from the county if it is truly about safety?
Again, I think it's partly the commercial component of it. You know, somebody else is living in the home that you are providing for them, as opposed to, you know, the choices that you make in your own home.
But if the city's really concerned about safety, wouldn't it be where, well, it's okay, you can buy this dump and you can just live in it and die. But if you're a renter, no, we can't do that.
Well, when we started this, it was a broader program that did include owner occupied, single family and two family existing dwellings. When we began the research that the Planning and Zoning Commission requested, then the council committee, what we found is for the most part, most of the housing stock in Wildwood is generally from about the 1980s on. So relatively speaking, it's 40 or 50 years on the oldest end. But as you know, the bulge of housing occurred around the 1990s. So we're getting into that 30-year period. So the thought was, is a lot of our housing stock is relatively new, so to speak, versus, let's say, old. And the council committee that's been reviewing this has left the door open, so to speak, and that as the community matures and the housing stock ages, there may be a need in the future. And from that perspective, we also discussed the fact that most sales of owner-occupied homes to another owner have private inspections. We also have the fire district as a component, at least in Metro West. So the thought was, is we're probably not at that stage yet, but that doesn't mean that that stage won't be reached at some point in the future.
It does seem like it is a stepping grounds to implement it citywide, and the rental community being a test subject for what is inevitably what the desire of the city is, to have every change of ownership, every change of, because like the idea of like referencing, oh, it's just for tenants, it's just for that. Well, yes, but it's a test ground.
Well, I don't think that has been, and we have all of our meetings recorded and on our YouTube channel. I don't think that was ever spoken either as part of a discussion or as in a memorandum. I think the true intent here again is to ensure that rental properties, as Ms. Ripito has mentioned, commercial component, so to speak, is safe and good for the neighborhood. And if we achieve this and you all do what you do all the time, keeping your property in good condition, it shouldn't need to be expanded.
What the gentleman earlier said also about permits, I would second, in the sense that if a inspector were to come to the property to say, this was not permitted, there are no permits on this property, he is absolutely within his right to deny a occupancy permit, not based on safety, but based on the permit not being pulled. Is there any redress or recourse for the property owner to contest that issue when it's not actually about safety, which is what it's being propagated as why this is being pushed?
There is, again, the program is originated from the city of Wildwood. So your recourse is to contact us. Let us figure out the details and what's the most reasonable approach. If it is a life safety issue, there's just not much that I would ever encourage us to do. I don't want to go home some night thinking, okay, I did somebody, this made sense. And 2 weeks later, there's a fire in the home because of that thing and somebody's injured. That's not going to be something any of us on staff want to have on our conscience. But certainly we can do that advocating. We can do that investigation for you and determine if it's appropriate and what they're saying is not. For example, if somebody did something 10 years ago and you bought the house and want to rent it to someone, it sure doesn't make sense to me that a 10-year permit, now we've got to start over. But again, if it's a life safety issue, if somebody's done something, let's say to a load-bearing wall and there's a sag, then obviously probably needs to be addressed not only for the perspective of the tenant, but you as an investor in that property.
I will say from personal experience, from an inspector in Baldwin, they showed up, called up into city, said, has there been any permits on this property? The response was no, and it proceeded to fail it because I did not use purple primer versus regular primer. And that is not a safety issue, but it is the thing that was absolutely failed. And so that I understand that maybe your current set of inspectors are great and that, but as far as futuristically, who is going, someone who's born today, who's going to be an inspector in 30 years from now, what are we expecting of them? Is there systems in place that is truly for safety and not just for permit pulling?
And I think the code components that we've identified that will be the typical inspection conducted by St. Louis County or in the future, City of Wildwood, are those that I think focus on life safety and ensuring the safety of the tenant and the protection of the property owner. So again, in that instance, I would hope someone would call City Hall and say, here's the situation. I'm sure there's a good reason that the different primer color. I'm not that.
It's just to verify that they looked at Baldwin's codes versus a different municipality. That's right. It.
So that just seems to me something that should be addressed between the contract, between the person, the entity, city contracting with the contractee.
It's irrelevant to my situation. It's just as the city is going through this process, how can you put safety blocks in there that it's truly about safety and there are recourses to ensure that, okay, if you're failed, it's really because you're a landlord that's being unsafe. Fix it versus a power trip for a inspector who wants to bring permit money into the city or the county. That's all my concern is.
And again, it's as with, is this a fishing expedition on permits? I would hope not. But that's something that out of tonight's meeting, we need to discuss with St. Louis County and get answers to. What happens if you do come to a property and you think no permits pulled, but what you're seeing is not a code violation? How do you handle that? And let's get an answer before we go too far along.
I've got one more thing that I wanted to touch on that was brought up before. That is the timing on this. I've had the luxury of working with St. Louis County and Wildwood on 4 different permits this last year. St. Louis County was not the issue. Wildwood was the absolute issue. They were absolutely terrible on timing, on getting this stuff through. And if you guys are going to do this, where now it's really impacting our pockets, I think that you need to come out and make a statement that once St. Louis County passes a house for a permit, that you will have in no less than 2 days a occupancy permit to us, or whatever the time frame is, because the reason we're renting houses is to make money. And if I have to wait 6 weeks for Wildwood to find it again and then make it go through 20 different people to sign something, that's not going to work.
Well, first I'll extend my apologies for the role the Department of Planning had in any delays. Certainly that's not the goal of the department nor the city to cause undue delays and problems for our residents. So my apologies. I owe you some statistics. I'm now going to owe you some discussion about what our time frame can be and the commitment we can make. And at this stage, I'm not willing to say we'll do it in 48 hours because I need to talk with Ms. Ripito. I need to talk with our council committee, but it's a legitimate concern. We have stumbled across problems with processing applications internally. We hope that the MyGov portal, the new online permitting system, would solve most of that in terms of management. We're still seeing a few growing pains with that, but I'll get you an answer.
Well, I mean, if the whole point of this is for a safety inspection and the house passes the safety inspection, then the rest is a signature away.
It should be. In a perfect
I
world.
do like the online.
Yeah. Other questions? Well, I'll close with a few things. If you filled out a comment form while you're listening to our discussion tonight and want to leave it, thank you. If you want to take one home, please do. And please take some cookies home too. We've got too many. So help yourself before you leave. Thank you all for coming. I know we've recorded this, so I won't be able to say I can't remember your questions or what I promised because it's all on tape. And so we'll get back to you and let you know. And thank you.